Hi guys, so today we will be discussing the topic of intracranial EEGs, or SEEGs for short. um, so I've got sort of like a little list of questions and I'm going to try and work my way through them and sort of give you a bit of like an insider perspective as to what one of them feels like. So for a little bit of backstory, I have drug-resistant epilepsy. I've had it now, I was diagnosed back in 2009, I think, 2008, 2009. So I've had it a long, long time now. But yeah, it's sort of eventually I've been through so many medications, sort of homeopathic treatments, that's the word. So I tried things like acupuncture around my head and sort of things like the ketogenic diet, things like fish oil, CBD oil, all the usual things that people come up with. But no, kept seizing. So eventually the SEEG was the only option I had left if I wanted to consider surgery. So, first question, what is an SEEG? So for those of you that may be familiar with epilepsy, normally what people undergo is called an EEG, which is where they sort of basically do lots of little electrodes all over your head. There will be sort of various points that they've sort of calculated, but I'm not going to pretend to understand that. But sort of they can vary in length from sort of, I don't know, say half an hour to 24 hours, So I've had all kinds. I've had multiple ones where they sort of put them in and just sort of like study for sort of half an hour to an hour. I've had a sleep deprived one. So I only had something like 3 hours sleep or something. And I had to sleep on literally the table in the exam room, which was really awkward. I don't even really have a blanket. And I also had a 24-hour EEG, which was horrible. Like, by far, that has remained scarred into my memory. So that one's basically where they attach all the wires like normal, but instead of connecting you to a machine, they hook you up to like a battery pack. And they said to my parents that I needed to have it as normal a day as possible. And so I would have been about 13, 14 at the time, which meant I had to go to school. And so I do remember going into school thankfully it was mufti day, but I was in the bulkiest hoodie I had. Hood was up, like trying to cover all my wires and everything. And I just felt so ugly, different. It was awful, awful feeling. And I don't think anyone was that outright nasty, but there was a lot of pointing and staring, and a few people did ask questions, which I didn't really mind the questions because people are naturally curious, But it was the looks I was getting. I think people tried to hide them, but it was no. So yeah, I've done all of the EEGs and none of them had sort of concluded anything. So that left me with the SEEG. So when did it happen? It was sort of, I think I was around 22 or 23 when that happened. But yeah, it's basically they put bolts in your head, like big metal bolts, and then put the electrodes on top of your actual brain. They do have to shave your hair off. So I went from like waist long hair, so like way down here, don't mind the cat, and I was just like, okay, fine. It's like a 2-year waiting list. Let's try out a bob. I tried the bob. I looked awful. My hair is naturally just very fine. Like, this is my natural hair color, texture, etc. And so a bob, it didn't work. The only hairstyle that works on this is long. And then I sort of got a call from the hospital maybe a couple of months after the initial sort of like acceptance of doing the scan. And they're like, okay, we've had a cancellation. Do you want to come in like a couple of weeks? And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, no. But I'm like, I can't wait 2 years. Like, yes, okay, fine, we'll get this over with. I really don't want to, but we'll get it over with. So back to the hairdressers I went. And I got a short sort of like crop hairstyle. And trust me, if you think the bob looked bad, like this looked 100 times worse. But yeah, it sort of needs must. And a couple of days later, went to hospital. They were very nice. And sort of before the actual operation, you have to have various scans done to sort of measure where your blood vessels are to make sure they don't hit them as they're drilling into your skull, which is some degree of comfort, I guess. But yeah, I've sort of done all my scans and I've turned up at hospital on the day, and sort of very nice neurosurgeons. The whole team was lovely, to be fair. But when I sort of came round from the procedure, my head was so heavy. You just sort of think, oh, they're wires, they don't weigh much. But sort of they have all the wires, which are then linked, like connected to each other, and sort of like held in like an almost dreadlock fashion, kind of. And then it's really hard to explain this bit, actually. But they're all sort of like connected at the base, and then your head is like wrapped around and run around with lots of bandages to make sure they don't move about, because you've got to keep these things in for 2 weeks in my case. But it depends how quickly they get the data they need. So theoretically, if you seized, I don't know, 3 to 5 times in the span of a couple of days, they're going to have enough data. You know, that's just a theoretical scenario. But with me, it took me so long to seize. Like, normally, I seize pretty much every other day. Although this week I've seized every day and it's been exhausting. But yeah, it's sort of, they keep you in for as long as they need to collect the data. I think eventually I had 2 or 3, but they had to half my medication like every couple of days in order to sort of provoke a response. But maybe because I had drug-resistant epilepsy, it didn't really do much. But I was so happy when I did seize, because I'm not doing this again. Yeah, it's sort of, when the doctors sort of said that the electrodes were going to go on the actual brain tissue, I'm like, how does any of that work? And to be fair, the surgeons, they were nice to sort of explain the process. And sort of after the procedure itself was done, you just try not to think about the fact there's stuff on your brain, because that's just gross. So next question. What did I imagine the procedure would be like before it happened? Nothing can really prepare you for an SEEG there. I sort of imagined it being like wires, like really nice light wires just being fed in, not really connected to anything, just maybe like not battery powered, but yeah, maybe a little. And just sort of, you sit with it for a little while. You can still go to the toilet, shower, do all things as normal. And then, yeah, you just sort of grit your teeth and get on with it. But the actual result is that you need to basically have someone escort you to wash, like to the shower room. You've got to make sure that someone holds all your wires for you, because obviously you're connected to like a big electricity thing up here. So you can't get those wires wet, you know. So sort of washing was really hard. In terms of going to the toilet, they had a commode in the room because they didn't really want to sort of miss any seizures whilst you were like unplugged from the machine per se. But we did come to an agreement that they'd turn the cameras off whilst I went to the toilet in the commode, and then they would turn them back on again afterwards. And I did discuss this in my book, Diary of an Epileptic, which I think you can get on Amazon. But yeah, the whole purpose I wrote that book was just to try and bring some comfort / education to people about epilepsy. So next question. What was the hospital admission like on a practical level? To be fair, it was pretty seamless. Like, I don't know if I mean that word, but you know, but they were very good, very efficient. It was literally like bang, bang, bang. These sort of steps happen. All very well run. So I can't really fault the hospital, to be fair. It's just, at the end of the day, it's an unpleasant procedure, you know. So next question. What does it actually feel like to wait for seizures whilst being monitored? Oh, it's really annoying actually, because you spend your whole life hoping that you're not going to have a seizure, and then suddenly you're like, oh, come on, where are they? And then they don't come. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, what if I don't have a seizure at all in these 2 weeks? And they were like, well, you might have to redo the procedure. I'm like, no, I need to seize. And it was like, try and get yourself stressed, or like slash the medication, or do this or do this. And I'm like, my seizures don't have an apparent trigger. I just seize. Like some people, it's if they get stressed or if they're tired, or all these sort of things. So when you just sort of sat in a bed staring at four walls, I think they did have a TV, to be fair, so that was something at least. But honestly, you do start driving yourself mad. No, I really can't fault the staff, the nurses, etc. They were amazing. I think my neurologist even popped up at one point, which was nice of him, because it was in the same hospital. But yeah, that's sort of next question. How did time feel during monitoring? Slow, tense, or surreal? It sort of felt like time had stopped. It's like, it kind of felt as if you were existing like within a bubble and the outside world had just stopped. You're sat there waiting for these seizures, and it's literally day by day is dragging, and hospital food is not the best, I'm not going to lie. And after 2 weeks of that, it's just like you feel like you never want to eat again. I think I did actually manage to lose about half a stone to a stone when I was there. I mean, I put it back on again, but yeah, waiting, it's not pleasant. I'm not going to dress it up. What surprised me most about the physical experience? You don't realise how much your hair means to you until it's been shaved off. And then on top of that, you wake up and your head is like so heavy, and it's sort of like you're having to like make every movement and judging based on the fact that your head moves a lot slower than the rest of you because you're packed with bandages and wires. So physically, it's exerting. It's tough, but sometimes people do need to have one done to actually figure out where the seizures are coming from. So mine, they sit in the fusiform and the lingual gyri. Sort of, I think it deals with visual processing, memory, directions, faces, things like that. But they sit deep within the occipital lobe, so the back sort of big chunk of your brain, which I think is why they weren't picked up on normal scans. But yeah, it's just where my epilepsy had developed, unfortunately. Did I feel exposed or observed in a way that I hadn't expected? Yeah, yes, is the short answer. In terms of privacy, you don't have any. It's when it's things like going to the toilet and stuff, they were like, we really should keep the cameras on. I'm like, could you just turn those off for that bit? And they were nice. They were lovely enough to sort of do that. But to sort of have every movement watched, it, like, my tip to you, if you have to sort of undergo one of these, which is unfortunate, sort of talk to the nurses. If you need to get changed from, like, I don't know, pajamas to, I don't know, a onesie, lounge suit, joggers, whatever you're going to wear during the day, sort of let them know. And normally what they'll do is they can turn the cameras off, sort of move them up or whatever, just so they're not focused on you. Or like they'll tell you where you can go in a blind spot in the room or something. Same goes for going to the toilet. But yeah, talk to them. Like, if you don't ask, then you don't get, kind of thing. Did I ever feel strangely normal during it all? Weirdly, kind of, actually. So again, the nurses that I had played a big part in this. Like, I think sort of visitors were a bit like, oh, okay, it's sort of big bandages, lots of wires, this is all very scary. But when the nurses would talk to me and just laugh, chat, tell me about their lives, kind of things like that, they talked to me and treated me as if I didn't have this huge grey bandage around my head with wires trailing out attached to a machine. And that was really, really helpful in sort of bringing a little bit of normality. You do get self-conscious about it, you know. So how did I feel when the electrodes were finally removed? That's a weird one. So sort of during the 2 weeks, they sort of kept giving me quite a lot of morphine to sort of stop the head from banging away. And when the day came to remove the electrodes, they were like, okay, fine, we're just going to do it today because we think we've got enough data. And I was like, oh, thank God, you know, because I think I was expecting to stay there like another 4 days or something. I was just like, oh, yes, thankfully, finally, you know. And I was like, do I need a local anaesthetic or something? And they're like, no, you should be fine. I'm like, oh, okay, that's scary. But sort of went down to theatre. It was all done very swiftly. It was a slightly unpleasant sensation, but I think because they'd given me so much morphine, I didn't feel any pain. But what it feels like when they take the bolts out is really, really weird. You could sort of hear/feel it. It's like an unscrewing sound, and you can sort of hear it like grinding against your skull, which is a little bit unpleasant. And when they pull the wire out, it sort of feels like someone's pulling string along your skin almost, because I don't think you have any pain receptors in your actual brain, but you do like on like your skin, blood vessels, maybe your skull, I think. Not sure about that one though. So it felt weird. It was a combination of like a squeaking and a pulling, but it wasn't really painful. And each hole was closed with a single stitch. Again, wasn't really painful. But I think it was because I'd been given quite a lot of morphine. So yeah, it was more of a relief having it sort of taken out. And one thing that you're sort of not really prepared for is once you've spent 2 weeks with big bandages and sort of like you've got used to your head being like this massive weight on your shoulders, it's like you sit up from the operation where they take them out and you sort of like shoot upright really quickly because you're lifting your head as if you're used to having like all these weights attached to it, and suddenly when your head feels like normal and you're like, whoa. But that was a really nice feeling, to be fair. I was relieved that I had finally caught some seizures. You know, when every other scan comes back blank, you know, you start losing hope. You're like, have I actually got epilepsy? What's wrong with me? Like, you start doubting everything. So, next question. Was there relief, disappointment, uncertainty, or something more complicated? I probably say something more complicated. So yeah, there's an element of relief, sort of like, you know, as I just said, hopefully you find something that helps, just does something, anything. And sort of shortly after, my neurologist and the surgeons that I'd had to sort of implant the electrodes, they sort of came up and they explained where the seizures were coming from. So the fusiform and lingual gyri on my right hand side, so about here-ish. And they said, if you want conventional surgery, so lobotomy, I think. Is it lobotomy? Craniotomy? I'm not sure, one of those words. But yeah, if you want conventional surgery, you would have to sever something called the occipital nerve, which on the way through to get to those areas of the brain. Okay, what does that mean? Like, nerves repair themselves, surely, you know. And apparently, when a nerve is severed, so completely cut, it can't stitch itself back together again. Now I'm like, okay, so what does that mean for me? And they sort of explained that sort of severing the occipital nerve meant that I wouldn't be able to see any peripheral vision to my left. So it would be much like having a hand there, you know, so not being able to see to the left at all. So I think it was out of both eyes. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, that's something big, losing out a big chunk of your vision. And I remember sitting in sort of the bed after they'd left, like, what do I do? Do I give up vision or do I just carry on with epilepsy? You what do I do? And, you know, even if I had have had the surgery, there's not a guarantee that the epilepsy would have been cured. So worst of both worlds is you have epilepsy and you're half blind. You know? So it was a big thing of disappointment, I think, in answer to that question, once like the results came through. But it is what it is. It's just where my epilepsy is, unfortunately. So what was the emotional come down like after everything was over? It felt a bit weird because it's sort of all these wires, etc., had been pulled out, and sort of people had stopped running around, sort of going, "Is she going to see? Is she going to see?" But you're still all stitched up. You've still got bandages on because obviously you've got to have bandages on because they've stitched you up, and you're bald. So it was difficult in the months afterwards because I think people just sort of go, "Okay, well, we're back to normal now." But recovering from a procedure like that is hard. It's very hard. Again, can't really dress it up, but that's just the nature of what it is, unfortunately. Looking back now, would I choose to go through the SEEG if I had to? That's a good question, actually. Sorry, don't mind the cat there. That's actually really hard. I think if I hadn't have had one before, so like if I was going into it blind, I would say, yes, we'll go for it. I don't know what's coming, we'll go for it. Having had one, knowing the procedure, knowing what happens, knowing what it feels like staying in that hospital for 2 weeks, I would say no. No, it's something you can go into blind and you can deal with it. But if you've already had one, knowing what's coming and the possibility of doing it again is just a big no for me. Like, it is a scary procedure. It's a scary procedure. It's a scary hospital stay. It's scary everything, you know. So no is the short answer to that. So next question: if someone is about to have an SEEG, what do I genuinely wish they knew beforehand? So, like I just said, not knowing what was coming was really helpful for me because I feel like the more that you knew, the more you can like wind yourself up. But one thing I wish that people did actually know was if you've got long hair and it needs to come off for the electrodes to be placed, you can donate it to sort of little like cancer charities for kids. So I think the main one is the Little Princess Trust. And yeah, if you, like particularly like a woman, for example, have a lot of hair that suddenly needs to be shaved off, just take the plunge, like go for either like the really short haircut or shave it off or whatever, and donate it, because then you'll be like, okay, I've done something good. So I think they need at least is it 6 inches of hair? I'm not sure. You'll have to double check that one. But yeah, I think it would have been good to have known that beforehand, because then it's like a feel good factor, you know. Okay, so final question: what did this experience change about how I see my epilepsy or my future? That's actually really hard. It sort of validated what the epilepsy was, if that makes sense. So beforehand, when every scan had just come back up blank / empty / whatever, you start to go, am I just going mad? Like, do I actually have this condition or don't I? Like, what's wrong with me? When you see those results on the scan, it's like, yes, you do have epilepsy. You've got seizures originating from here. You go, oh, okay, that sort of gives me a little bit of validation. I've finally found it. Because this is, we're talking like 11, 12 years post diagnosis, I would have said. Maybe closer to 11. So it took me a long time to sort of have that procedure and eventually have some kind of result. Although whilst they found the electricity in those two parts, now this is where your seizures are originating from, which is brilliant news, you know. They said you've also got electricity elsewhere in your brain, but we don't think it's strong enough to start causing seizures. So that's when they sort of decided that those two bits, the two fusiform, so the fusiform and the lingual gyrus, needed to be removed. But that sort of brings you around to the whole lip surgery, which is a whole different kettle of fish. You know? So I did eventually have the lip surgery. You can sort of check out sort of how that went with either sort of my various videos on my channel, or you can read my book, Diary of an Epileptic, which only came out today, I think, actually. And that sort of details from before my diagnosis to the present day. So I'm hoping that will help a couple of people at least. But yeah. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative. And yeah, if you liked it, please do a little thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully see you next time. Okay, bye.